Hi there. We're going to jump right into Daniel 2. At the end of Daniel 2 today, Daniel 2:45 is where we're going to start, and it's where we left off last time, actually. And you remember Daniel 2 was Nebuchadnezzar putting forth this idea that, and he was very angry because nobody could do what he wanted them to do. I had this dream, it's bothering me, somebody fix it, somebody tell me what it's about. Nobody could. Daniel, the Lord brings Daniel to him. Proverbs 16:9, we make plans and the Lord directs our paths. This is not where Daniel wanted to be. This is not the situation that Nebuchadnezzar wanted to be in, but the Lord put them together. And so the Lord can use it to glorify himself, and he did. And you'll often be in the presence of people that, well, you would rather not be in their presence. And it could be anybody. It could be relatives, could be a troublesome boss, could be or co-worker, could be a neighbor that you can't get away from and you can't move out. It could be a lot of things. We have a lot of limitations. And but the Lord brings people together. People are never an interruption, and that's why. Because they may interrupt what you want, your comfort and your convenience and your security, but they're really an opportunity. They're not a surprise to the Lord, and they're not there just to bother you. They're there as an opportunity. The Lord says in Job 23:10 that it's a test. It's an opportunity. That's what a test is, an opportunity to prove that you are who you say you are if you're following the Lord. But in 2:45, Daniel tells him his dream. It says in the bottom, at the back, the bottom of 2:45, the dream is certain and its interpretation sure. So that's where we're at. And I'm just going to walk through all this. I'm not going to be able to, because these are chewables, I'm not going to read all of this. So we're walking through, and then you can go back and read word by word later, okay? And send questions if you want. The email, and I've got a few people sending questions and that kind of thing. And I'm kind of folding the answers into the videos for them. But you're welcome to go back to the welcome video and look at my... and find where it says my email address in there. You can send, it's in the YouTube channel on the whatever tab that is at the back. And so you're welcome to send notes there, okay? Or Facebook or Instagram. The links are up there on the YouTube banner too. But the dream is certain and its interpretation sure. And look at verse 46. Chapter 2, verse 46 is really where we're going to start. And I wanted to call your attention to King Nebuchadnezzar's his reaction. And it says, then King Nebuchadnezzar does what? Fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. Right? I mean, so he's honoring somebody that he's not listening to Daniel, who says it's God's, his God is the revealer of secrets. But that gets changed here, and looks like it may be looking up for Nebuchadnezzar. It says, the king answered Daniel in verse 47 and said, truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets. That was last time, the revealer of secrets part. Excuse me. And so it seems like, boy, all of a sudden Nebuchadnezzar is a faithful believer in the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. That's not the case. Just because some people say things doesn't mean that they are. I mean, the Lord looks at the heart, and only time and their actions tell. Jesus said that the fruit is what is faith without works is dead. It says that in James and Galatians, and it says, it backs it up there. And Jesus said it in Matthew. It says it in John, that what comes out of the mouth is an overflow of the heart. But nobody can. If their actions don't match the words, it doesn't mean it's a godly person necessarily. And only time tells that. The Lord reveals it, what's secret to us. And it says in verse 48, then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts. And we find out that this statue that's in Daniel 2 that we haven't talked about yet. I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit when we get to Daniel 7, because it's connected. But what Nebuchadnezzar takes away is not that God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, even though he says that. What he's thinking about, and we find out why here in just a second, what he's thinking about is that I'm the head of gold. I'm the head of the statue. I'm the head of Daniel's God, and he's going to, he's lifting me up. And he's thinking about himself. And you read in chapter 3, verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold. Right? He's that statue of the head of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. That's about 90 feet. So you're talking about a 9-story building. That's not small. 9-story building, about a 9-foot base in width. And so that would seem to be a really long, skinny man, but a really long, skinny statue. But there was probably a big pedestal, And actually, Percy Shelley wrote about this in his poetry. The husband of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, who it's amazing. Frankenstein, the idea, I wonder if they sat around, if Mary and Percy sat around and talked about this, because the point of Frankenstein is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Bad things can happen. And boy, he's doing something that he's able to do, but he shouldn't do here. And I'll make note of that poem here in a minute. But so it says here that he made up this statue of gold, and I'll let you read from there all the way down to verse 15. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, he gathers all these people together. Daniel is not mentioned, so we're not sure where he is. Maybe he's off on an errand for the king, doing something, who knows. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are here with all the other leaders. Remember, they've been elevated. They're in the court. They're, and it says in verse 15, actually in verse 14, so Nebuchadnezzar speaks to them saying, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up?" See, the people around him saying, we're all doing this. We're all going to bow down to this king, just like you've read in the first 14 verses there of chapter 3, or you will. And now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are saying, we're not going to do that. That's not, but you're talking about in front of God and everybody here. In front of God, in front of the king, in front of they're well aware of their audience, in front of all the governors and it says satraps and all these people. It's all the leaders, what we would call the political leaders of the land, and all the power brokers and everybody in Washington, D.C. gathered around, the statue. And look at what he says in verse 15, Nebuchadnezzar, "Now if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn and the flute," and it goes on, there was a big sign, big to do. People that are proud like to draw attention to themselves. They just do. And that's all through the Bible too. "And you fall down and worship the image which I have made good." That's what it says, good. Well, that's an interesting word, good. Jesus said nobody is good but God in that sense. And actually, it says in Isaiah 5, verse 20 or so, Isaiah is talking about this time. These men are in exile because what we would call Israel, the nation, the Hebrew nation, the people of Judah, the people of all the Jews, the Hebrews, they would not follow God like they were supposed to be. And so what do they do here? What happens? Well, they're off in exile, and Isaiah was talking about it. You do this, and I'm looking for justice and righteousness, and you're chasing injustice and bloodshed and horrible things that we in America actually could take a lesson from. But it sends us into exile, and part of that is it says that woe to those, trouble will come to those who call evil what God calls evil. If you call what God calls evil, if you call it good, trouble will come to you. That's what it says. And he says it's good if you bow down to this thing, and they know better. But if you do not worship, but if not, isn't that interesting? There's 3 little interesting words. But if not, but there's another but if not coming in just a second, so hold on. But if not, if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Now, we share this story with children, and it really is not a children's story at all. And what I mean by that, it's not bad to introduce the story to children, but you can't explain all of this to children. It should, and what the problem is that we that are adults, we look at the Bible and go, oh yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, they were so faithful, it was good, and they got out of the furnace, and that's good. But we don't apply it to our lives. We don't look at all this historical detail. This is serious stuff. And you can't, it's like turning turning a Tesla into a little Hot Wheel car and not being amazed at what all the technology is and using it and all of that. So my son likes Teslas, so we think about electric cars in my house. But anyway, but cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Now, see, somebody keeps talking long enough, and what comes out of the mouth will be overflow of the heart. They will reveal themselves if they keep talking long enough. And sure, he's saying in one chapter ago, he's telling Daniel, oh, your God is the God of God and the King of Kings and Lord of Lords and all that. But he doesn't think that same God who can reveal his dreams and all of that, he doesn't think that same God can deliver these three guys out of this fiery furnace. Who is the God? I mean, see, he's mocking them. He's mocking the same God he was lifting up just a minute ago. And some people do that. They'll do it and they'll put God up in public, and then they'll despise him in private by the way they act and how they do things. And then it'll eventually come out in public. We call that scandal, but the Lord calls it normal. It's been happening for a long time. And in verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. Now that's not snarky. They're not being mean. They're not taunting him. We have no need. The sense there is they have no need to come up with an answer. We don't need to think about what our answer is. We know what our answer is. Look at verse 17. If this is the case, that you're going to throw us into a fiery furnace and all that stuff that he just said, if this is the case, our God whom we serve is able. Whoa. See, he is a reflection of I am, the God of Moses. Who are you? I am. I am the God. I am. He will deliver us from your hand. Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. And then remember I was saying just a little while ago in verse 15, it says, but if you do not worship, Nebuchadnezzar was telling them, but if you do not worship, if you do this, it's good. If you bow down and do what I tell you, it's good. But if you do not worship, bad things are going to happen to you. And it turns out that exactly the opposite is true. They say, but if not. God may or may not save our bodies, but he will deliver us in one way or the other. It may cause us pain. See, these guys aren't looking to get out of the situation. They're not trying to run away. They're not trying to hide what they are or who they serve. It says, but if not, let it be known to you, O king, in verse 18, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Now, in verses 19 through the end of chapter 3, the rest of the story you can read for yourself if you don't know it. This is a vitamin, not a meal, remember. These men were bound in their coats and their trousers, it says in verse 21, their turbans and their other garments, very visual. And they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And they come out, and when they come out, it says in verse 25, look, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. And that's interesting. If you go to Revelation, let's go there real quick. If you go all the way to the back of the book, in Revelation 1:13, it says something really interesting. The Son of God, Revelation 1:13, and it says, in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet and girded about the chest with a golden band. You know, in Revelation 1, and all these verses around it, I mean, I just jumped into something that would be 18 of these videos. But do you know that Revelation 1 is the only physical description of Jesus Christ in the whole Bible? The only thing we know about what he looked like when he was walking around on the planet, people think, well, he must have been a normal Jew. This is kind of what they look like, and that could be true. But the issue is that I mean, we know he had a beard because it says they pulled it out. There's some things like that. But see, Jesus never changes. Before he comes in the incarnation, afterwards, he is like the Son of God. And we're going to stop there and we'll do part 2. Okay? Bye.